The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from a large holographic display hovering over the polished metal table. General Aaron Hayes stood at the head of the table, his face grim as he stared at the images of the destroyed outpost on Proxima 7. The faces of the dead medics stared back at him from the screen, men and women who had dedicated their lives to saving others, regardless of race or allegiance. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Around the table sat his most trusted advisors. Colonel Rachel Monroe leaned forward, her sharp eyes scanning the intelligence reports spread out before them. Lieutenant Commander Benjamin Carter adjusted his glasses, his usually calm demeanor replaced by quiet anger. "This wasn't just an attack," Carter said finally, breaking the heavy silence. "It was deliberate. They went after the medics first." Hayes nodded slowly. "And they made sure no one survived to tell the story." He tapped a button on the console, and the hologram shifted to show footage of Krylos ships retreating from the scene. "But we know who did it. Intelligence confirms those are Krylos military vessels." Monroe frowned. "If this came straight from their command, then everything we've worked for, the treaties, the neutral zones, it's all worthless. This is a declaration of war." Hayes didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked around the table, his boots clicking against the floor. When he spoke, his voice was low but firm. "We can't let this stand. But if we respond with brute force, we'll look like monsters. We need something smarter, sharper, something that strikes fear without losing our humanity." Carter raised an eyebrow. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "Sir, a specialized unit," Hayes replied. "A team trained to operate in the shadows, to hit hard and fast where it hurts the most. A team so deadly, so relentless, that when our enemies hear their name, they'll think twice about crossing us again." Monroe tilted her head, intrigued. "You're talking about assassins." "No," Hayes corrected her. "Not assassins. Warriors, soldiers who will remind the galaxy what happens when you mess with Earth. I'm calling them the Angels of Death." The room fell silent. Carter scribbled notes on a tablet while Monroe crossed her arms, thinking. "Who do you have in mind?" she asked after a moment. Hayes turned to Monroe. "That's your job. Find me the best. People who can adapt, improvise, and survive in impossible situations. People who won't hesitate to do what needs to be done." Monroe nodded. She already had a few names in mind, though assembling such a group wouldn't be easy. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were individuals who had proven themselves capable of operating outside the rules. Some might even call them dangerous. But danger was exactly what they needed right now. As the meeting broke up, Hayes called Monroe aside. "Rachel," he said quietly, "this has to work. If we don't send a message now, we risk losing everything. Not just the colonies, but Earth itself." "I understand, sir," Monroe replied. Her expression softened slightly. "But remember, these kinds of operations leave scars on everyone involved." Hayes met her gaze. "Scars heal. Cordis doesn't." Over the next few days, Monroe began reaching out to potential recruits. The first name on her list was Captain Jason Rivera, a former Marine sniper known for his precision and patience. Next was Sergeant Lauren Bennett, whose reputation for close-quarters combat was unmatched. Then there was Dr. Nathan Cole, a battlefield medic who had lost his entire team during a surprise ambush and vowed never to let that happen again. Finally, she added Corporal Ethan Grant, a tech specialist whose hacking skills had saved countless lives in previous conflicts. Each recruit received the same message. "Your presence is requested for a mission of utmost importance. Details will follow upon arrival." None refused. When the four arrived at a secret training facility hidden deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, they found themselves face to face with Colonel Monroe. Her tone left no room for argument. "Welcome to the beginning of something new," she said. "By the time you leave here, you'll either be ready to change the course of this war, or you'll wish you'd never joined." Rivera glanced at the others, his dark eyes unreadable. "Angels of Death, huh? he muttered under his breath. Let's hope they live up to the name. The training facility on the moon was cold and sterile, its metallic walls reflecting the harsh glow of artificial lights. The 4 recruits stood in a large chamber, their breaths visible in the freezing air. Colonel Rachel Monroe paced in front of them, her boots echoing against the floor. She stopped and turned to face the group, her sharp gaze sweeping over each of them. "You've been chosen because you're the best," she began, her voice steady and commanding. "But being the best isn't enough. What we need is something more, something that goes beyond skill or bravery. We need people who can adapt, improvise, and survive in situations where failure means death." Captain Jason Rivera shifted slightly, his arms crossed over his chest. His dark eyes studied Monroe carefully, as if trying to read her intentions. Sergeant Lauren Bennett stood beside him, her muscular frame relaxed but alert. Dr. Nathan Cole adjusted his glasses, his expression thoughtful, while Corporal Ethan Grant leaned against the wall, his fingers tapping nervously on his leg. Monroe continued, "You'll train together until you function as one unit. Trust will be your strongest weapon and your only lifeline. If you don't trust each other, you'll fail. And failure is not an option." With that, the training began. The first few days were brutal. The recruits woke early and trained late into the night, pushing their bodies to the limit. They ran through obstacle courses designed to test their endurance, solved puzzles under pressure, and practiced hand-to-hand combat in zero-gravity chambers. Each task was harder than the last, forcing them to rely on one another. Rivera quickly proved himself to be a natural leader, taking charge during tactical exercises. His calm demeanor and sharp instincts earned him respect from the others. Bennett, however, wasn't convinced. She often clashed with him, arguing that his cautious approach slowed them down. During one exercise, they nearly came to blows after disagreeing on how to breach a simulated enemy stronghold. Cole tried to mediate between them, reminding them of their shared goal. "We're here for the same reason," he said firmly. "To stop people like the ones who killed those medics. Fighting among ourselves won't bring them justice." Grant stayed quiet most of the time, observing the dynamics of the group. He preferred working behind the scenes, using his tech skills to hack into locked systems or disable traps. Despite his reserved nature, he became an invaluable asset, often finding creative solutions to problems that stumped the others. As the weeks passed, the team grew closer. They learned to anticipate each other's moves and cover for one another's weaknesses. In one particularly grueling simulation, they were dropped into a hostile environment, with limited supplies, and tasked with surviving for 48 hours. Rivera devised a strategy to conserve resources. Bennett scouted ahead to ensure safe passage. Cole treated minor injuries, and Grant rigged makeshift tools from scrap metal. By the end of the exercise, they had completed the mission without losing a single member. Their bond deepened further when Monroe introduced them to their new gear. Advanced exosuits equipped with cloaking technology allowed them to move unseen, while nanobots embedded in their uniforms could repair wounds instantly. Weapons were lightweight yet devastatingly effective, capable of disabling enemies without causing unnecessary harm. Each piece of equipment was tailored to maximize their individual strengths. Despite their progress, tension lingered beneath the surface. One evening, after a long day of training, Bennett confronted Rivera in the mess hall. "You think you're in charge just because you call the shots," she snapped, her voice low but intense. "This isn't your team, it's ours." Rivera met her glare calmly. "I'm not trying to take over. I'm just doing what needs to be done. If you have a problem with that, fine. But don't let it get us killed." Before Bennett could respond, Cole stepped in. "Enough," he said firmly. "We're stronger together. Remember why we're here." Bennett hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Rivera offered a small smile. "Good. Now let's focus on what matters." By the time their training ended, the Angels of Death were ready. They weren't just soldiers. They were a family bound by purpose. As they prepared to leave the moon base, Monroe addressed them one last time. "Out there, You'll face horrors beyond imagination. But remember this. You are Earth's response to evil. You are the angels of death." And with that, they boarded their ship, heading toward the unknown. Their mission awaited. And so did revenge. The angels of death stood in the shadowy cargo bay of their sleek, black spacecraft as it descended toward Proxima 7. The planet's surface loomed closer, a barren wasteland of jagged rocks and swirling red dust. Captain Jason Rivera adjusted his exosuit, ensuring the cloaking technology was functioning properly. Beside him, Sergeant Lauren Bennett double-checked her weapon, her movements quick and precise. Dr. Nathan Cole and Corporal Ethan Grant exchanged quiet words, their voices barely audible over the hum of the engines. Colonel Rachel Monroe's voice crackled through their earpieces. "Remember your objective," she said firmly. "Disable the communications array without alerting the Krylos forces. Stealth is key. If they spot you, the mission is compromised." Rivera nodded, though Monroe couldn't see him. He turned to the team. "Let's move fast and stay sharp. Stick to the plan." The ship touched down silently on a ridge overlooking the Krylos base. The Angels stepped out into the cold, biting wind, their exosuits masking their presence. The terrain was treacherous, littered with sharp rocks and deep crevices. As they moved, Grant used a handheld scanner to map out the safest path. The device beeped softly, highlighting hidden dangers beneath the ground. "This way," Grant whispered, pointing toward a narrow ravine that led directly to the communications tower. The team followed, staying low and avoiding open areas. The tower stood tall in the distance, its blinking lights visible even through the haze of dust. As they approached, Bennett signaled for them to stop. She pointed to a group of Krylos soldiers patrolling near the base of the tower. Their elongated bodies moved awkwardly but efficiently, their glowing eyes scanning the area. Rivera crouched behind a rock, studying the patrol pattern. "We wait," he murmured. "Let them pass." Minutes felt like hours as the Angels remained motionless, their breaths shallow to avoid detection. Finally, the patrol moved farther away, giving them an opening. Rivera gestured for the team to advance. They crept closer to the tower, their footsteps muffled by the soft ground. Cole knelt beside the tower's control panel, pulling out a small device from his pack. His fingers flew across the keypad as he hacked into the system. "Almost there," he muttered under his breath. The others formed a protective circle around him, weapons at the ready. Suddenly, Grant's scanner emitted a sharp beep. "Movement detected," he hissed. "Two more patrols heading this way." Bennett cursed under her breath. "We're running out of time." "Just a few more seconds," Cole replied, his focus unbroken. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead despite the freezing air. Finally, the panel clicked, and the tower's lights flickered off. "Done," he said, standing quickly. "Let's go." The team retreated into the ravine, moving faster now that their cover was blown. Behind them, alarms blared, and shouts echoed through the night. Red beams of light cut through the darkness as Krylos searchlights scanned the area. "They know we're here," Rivera shouted. "Split up. Meet at the extraction point." Bennett broke off to the left, drawing fire from the pursuing soldiers. Her exosuit's cloaking technology flickered as she fired back, forcing the Krylos to focus on her. Rivera and Cole ran together, dodging blasts of energy, while Grant covered their retreat with a portable jamming device that disrupted the enemy's targeting systems. The Angels regrouped at a rocky outcrop near the extraction zone, their breathing heavy but their spirits high. "Everyone okay?" Rivera asked, scanning the group. They nodded, though Bennett had a fresh scorch mark on her suit. Grant pointed to the horizon, where their ship hovered, waiting. "There's our ride." But before they could move, the ground beneath them trembled. A massive Krylos mech emerged from the dust, its metal limbs towering over them. Its glowing eyes locked onto the team, and it raised a massive clawed arm. "We've got company," Bennett growled, raising her weapon. Rivera stepped forward, his voice calm but urgent. "Take it down. Aim for the joints. The Angels opened fire, their shots striking the mech's weak points. Sparks flew as the machine staggered but didn't fall. Cole tossed a grenade, the explosion sending the mech crashing to the ground. Without hesitation, the team sprinted toward the ship. As they climbed aboard, the ramp closed behind them, sealing them inside. The pilot lifted off immediately, leaving the chaos below. Through the window, they watched the Krylos forces shrink into the distance. Monroe's voice came through the intercom. Mission accomplished. Good work, Angels. Rivera leaned back in his seat, letting out a long breath. For now, they had succeeded, but he knew this was only the beginning. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, and the Angels of Death would be ready. The ship soared through the dark expanse of space, its engines humming softly as it carried the Angels of Death back to their temporary base. Inside, the team sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Captain Jason Rivera stared out the window at the endless void, his mind replaying the events on Proxima 7. The mission had been a success. They had disabled the communications array and escaped alive. But something about the operation didn't sit right with him. Sergeant Lauren Bennett leaned against the wall, her arms crossed. She glanced at Rivera. "That was too easy," she said finally, breaking the quiet. "The Krylos knew we were coming." Rivera nodded slowly. "I thought so too. Someone tipped them off." Dr. Nathan Cole frowned, adjusting his glasses. "If that's true, then we got a bigger problem. There's a traitor somewhere in our ranks, or someone feeding intel to the enemy." Corporal Ethan Grant, seated near the cockpit, turned to face them. "Or maybe they're just smarter than we thought. They could have guessed we'd target the array first." "Maybe," Rivera replied, his voice low. "But guessing isn't the same as knowing. We need answers before we move forward." When they returned to the moon base, Colonel Rachel Monroe greeted them in the hangar. Her expression was grim, confirming Rivera's suspicions. Before anyone could speak, she held up a hand. "We've got trouble," she said bluntly. "Intel suggests the Krylos are planning a large-scale assault on a nearby human settlement. It's a trap. They're using civilians as bait to draw us out." Bennett clenched her fists. "So what do we do? Let them attack innocent people?" "No," Monroe replied firmly. "But we can't send in the fleet either. If we do, we'll walk right into their ambush. Instead, you'll go ahead of the main force. Your job is to sabotage key targets and weaken their defenses. Make them think twice about attacking." Cole stepped forward. "What kind of targets are we talking about?" Monroe pulled up a holographic map of the Krylos stronghold. Red markers dotted the landscape, highlighting supply depots, weapon caches, and command centers. "Hit these locations," she instructed. "Take out their resources and disrupt their chain of command. Without those, they'll struggle to mount an effective offensive." Grant studied the map carefully. "This isn't going to be easy. Some of these sites are heavily guarded." "That's why you're here," Monroe said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You're the best chance we've got. And remember, stay hidden. If they catch you, there won't be any backup." The team prepared quickly, loading their gear and reviewing the plan one last time. As they boarded their ship, Rivera turned to them. "This mission is risky, but we've done harder things. Stick together, and we'll make it through." The journey to the Krylos stronghold was tense. The Angels landed far from the main base, choosing a secluded area surrounded by dense rock formations to avoid detection. Under the cover of darkness, they moved toward their first target, a supply depot filled with ammunition and fuel. Grant hacked into the security system, disabling cameras and alarms. "Clear," he whispered, signaling the others to proceed. Bennett took point, her movements silent and deliberate. Rivera followed close behind, scanning the area for threats. Cole brought up the rear, ready to patch any injuries if needed. Inside the depot, the team worked quickly. Cole planted explosives on key storage tanks, while Bennett and Rivera kept watch. Grant monitored the systems, ensuring no reinforcements arrived. Just as they finished setting the charges, a faint hum echoed through the air. "They're coming," Grant hissed. "Fast." Rivera cursed under his breath. "Detonate the charges and move out." Cole pressed the trigger, and a series of muffled explosions shook the ground. Flames erupted from the depot, lighting up the night sky. The team sprinted toward their extraction point, pursued by the sound of angry shouts and gunfire. As they reached the ship, Bennett turned and fired a few shots to cover their retreat. Rivera shouted for everyone to board. Once inside, the pilot lifted off immediately, leaving the chaos behind. Monroe's voice came through the intercom. "Good work, Angels, but this is just the start. Keep pushing. They won't know what hit them." Rivera looked at his team, their faces illuminated by the glow of the control panel. They were tired, battered, but still standing. He allowed himself a small smile. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The Angels of Death moved cautiously through the dense forest, their exosuits blending seamlessly with the shadows. The air was thick with humidity, and the faint glow of alien plants cast eerie patterns on the ground. Captain Jason Rivera led the way, his sharp eyes scanning for any sign of danger. Behind him, Sergeant Lauren Bennett kept her weapon ready, her movements quiet but deliberate. Dr. Nathan Cole adjusted the strap of his medical kit, while Corporal Ethan Grant held a scanner that beeped softly, guiding them toward their next target. Their mission was far from over. After destroying the supply depot, they had received new orders: infiltrate a heavily guarded Krylos research facility rumored to hold secrets about biological weapons. Intelligence suggested the Krylos were experimenting on captured humans, using them as test subjects for horrific experiments. The thought made Cole's stomach churn, but he pushed the feeling aside. They had a job to do. As they approached the facility, the trees thinned out, revealing a massive structure surrounded by high walls and patrolling guards. Red beams from automated turrets scanned the perimeter, creating a nearly impenetrable barrier. Grant crouched behind a fallen log, studying the layout on his scanner. "There's a weak spot in the southeast corner," he whispered. "The turrets overlap there, leaving a small blind spot." Rivera nodded. "We'll go in through there. Stay low and move fast." The team crept forward, timing their movements carefully to avoid detection. When they'd reached the blind spot, Bennett used a grappling hook to scale the wall, securing a rope for the others to follow. One by one, they climbed up, their breaths shallow as they listened for any signs of alarm. Once inside, they dropped silently to the ground, landing in a narrow alley between two buildings. Grant pulled up a map of the facility on his wrist console. "The lab is on the 3rd floor," he said quietly. "But we'll need to take out the power first to disable the security cameras." Cole frowned. "Taking out the power will alert them. We won't have much time once it happens." "We don't need much," Rivera replied. "Just enough to get in, grab what we need, and get out." They split into pairs. Rivera and Bennett headed for the power station, while Cole and Grant made their way to the lab. The corridors were dimly lit, the only sounds coming from distant machinery and the occasional footsteps of Krylos soldiers. Every step felt like walking on thin ice, the tension pressing down on them. At the power station, Rivera and Bennett worked quickly. Bennett disabled the guards with precise shots, her aim unwavering. Rivera flipped switches and yanked cables, plunging the area into darkness. Alarms blared instantly, piercing the silence. "Move," Rivera shouted into his communicator. On the 3rd floor, Cole and Grant heard the alarms and picked up the pace. They reached the lab just as the emergency lights flickered on. Inside, rows of glass tanks lined the walls, each containing grotesque creatures that seemed part human, part alien. Cole's hands trembled as he saw the faces of the victims floating lifelessly in the liquid. Some were still alive, their eyes wide with terror. This is monstrous," Cole muttered, his voice shaking. "There's no time to process it now," Grant said firmly. "Grab what you can and plant the charges." Cole snapped out of his daze and began downloading data from the computers while Grant set explosives around the room. As they worked, the sound of heavy boots echoed down the hallway. Reinforcements were coming. "Hurry up." Rivera's voice crackled through their earpieces. "We're almost done," Grant replied, setting the last charge. "Let's go." The team regrouped at the extraction point, their hearts pounding as Krylos soldiers closed in. Bennett covered their retreat, firing bursts of energy to slow the enemy. Just as they reached the ship, the explosives detonated, sending a fiery explosion ripping through the facility. The ground shook beneath their feet as they scrambled aboard. As the ship ascended, the Angels watched the inferno below, their expressions grim. Cole leaned against the wall, his face pale. "Those people, we couldn't save them." "You did what you could," Rivera said firmly. "And you stopped the Krylos from doing worse." Monroe's voice came through the intercom. "Mission complete. Return to base." No one spoke as the ship sped away. The weight of what they had seen and done hung heavy in the air. They had struck a blow against the Krylos, but the cost was etched into their minds. The war was far from over, and the scars it left would never fully heal. The Angels of Death returned to their moon base battered and weary, but there was no time to rest. The destruction of the Krylos research facility had been a victory, but it came at a cost. Dr. Nathan Cole sat alone in the briefing room, staring at the data he had salvaged from the lab. The files were filled with horrifying details, experiments on humans, genetic manipulation, and plans for weapons designed to wipe out entire populations. Cole's hands trembled as he scrolled through the information, his mind struggling to process the scale of the atrocities. Captain Jason Rivera entered the room, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said quietly, sitting across from Cole. "What did you find?" Cole hesitated before speaking. "It's worse than we thought. They weren't just experimenting. They were creating something. A virus, maybe. Something that could spread fast and kill without mercy." Rivera's jaw tightened. "If they finish it, millions could die." "That's not all," Cole continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some of the victims, they were medics. People like Emily Dawson. The Krylos captured them after the outpost attack and brought them here." Rivera clenched his fists, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. "Then we stopped them. Whatever it takes." Colonel Rachel Monroe called the team together shortly after. Her face was grim as she addressed them. "Intelligence confirms the Krylos are close to completing their weapon. It's being developed in a fortified bunker deep underground. If we don't destroy it now, it'll be too late." Sergeant Lauren Bennett crossed her arms. "How do we get inside? If it's as secure as you say, we won't make it past the front door." Monroe nodded. "That's why Corporal Grant has come up with a plan. He'll go in first, disable the security systems, and create an opening for the rest of you. Once inside, your priority is the weapon. Destroy it, no matter what." Grant stepped forward, holding up a small device. "I can hack into their mainframe, but I'll need a distraction to buy me time. Someone will have to draw their attention while I work." "I'll do it," Bennett volunteered immediately. "I can handle myself." Rivera shook his head. "No, we stick together. If you're caught, we lose our chance." "Then we split up temporarily," Monroe interjected. "Bennett creates the diversion, and the rest of you move in. But remember, this is a one-way mission. If you're spotted, you won't survive." The team prepared silently, each lost in their own thoughts. As they suited up, Cole approached Bennett. "Be careful," he said softly. "We need you alive." Bennett gave him a small smile. "Don't worry about me. Just focus on finishing the job." The mission began under the cover of darkness. The Angels approached the bunker from different angles, moving quickly and quietly. Bennett reached her position first, setting up explosives near a patrol route. When the charges detonated, chaos erupted. Krylos soldiers rushed toward the explosion, leaving the entrance vulnerable. Inside, Grant worked frantically, his fingers flying across the keypad connected to the bunker's security system. "Almost there," he muttered, sweat dripping down his face. Rivera and Cole stood guard, their weapons trained on the corridor. Suddenly, alarms blared. Reinforcements were coming. "Hurry," Rivera shouted. "I'm in," Grant replied, hitting the final key. The doors slid open, revealing the heart of the bunker. The team moved inside, their eyes scanning the room. At the center was a massive containment unit, glowing faintly with an ominous green light. "This is it," Cole said, his voice trembling. "The weapon." Rivera handed him a detonator. "Blow it." As Cole set the charges, the sound of footsteps echoed through the chamber. Krylos soldiers poured in, their weapons firing. Rivera and Grant returned fire, covering Cole as he worked. Bullets ricocheted off the walls, sparks flying everywhere. "We're out of time," Rivera yelled. "Finish it." "Where's Bennett?" Rivera asked urgently. Before anyone could answer, a voice crackled through their earpieces. "I'm here," Bennett said weakly. "Get out. Now." The team regrouped and fled the collapsing bunker, reaching the extraction point just as their ship descended. As they boarded, Rivera looked back at the burning structure. They had succeeded, but the victory felt hollow. Inside the ship, Grant collapsed into a seat, his breathing labored. "Did we stop it?" he asked. Rivera nodded. "For now." But as the ship soared into space, none of them spoke. Sacrifices had been made, and the scars would remain. The war was far from over, but the angels of death had proven one thing: Earth would fight back, no matter the cost. The angels of death returned to their moon base battered and bruised, their bodies aching from the fight, but their spirits remained unbroken. The destruction of the Krylos weapon had been a victory, but it was clear that the war was far from over. Colonel Rachel Monroe called them into the briefing room, her expression tense as she reviewed the latest intelligence reports. "The Krylos are planning another move," she said, her voice low but firm. "Their command center is coordinating attacks on multiple human settlements. If we don't act now, they'll crush our forces piecemeal." Captain Jason Rivera leaned forward, his dark eyes sharp. "What's the plan?" Monroe pulled up a holographic map showing the location of the Krylos command center. It was a massive structure built into the side of a mountain, surrounded by layers of defenses. "We can't attack it directly. It's too well guarded, but there's a way to weaken them first." She explained her idea: plant false intel suggesting an imminent Earth assault on the Krylos homeworld. This would force the Krylos to divert resources to protect their home, leaving their command center vulnerable. The Angels' job was to deliver the fake data and ensure it reached the right hands. "This isn't just about sabotage anymore," Monroe added. "It's about turning the tide. If we pull this off, we can cripple their entire operation." Sergeant Lauren Bennett cracked her knuckles. "Sounds risky. What happens if they figure out it's a trick?" "Then we improvise," Rivera replied. "That's what we're here for." The team prepared quickly, loading gear designed to mimic Krylos technology. Corporal Ethan Grant worked tirelessly to create a data chip containing the false intel, encrypting it to look authentic. Dr. Nathan Cole double-checked their medical supplies, knowing injuries were inevitable. As they boarded their ship, the weight of the mission hung heavy in the air. The journey to the Krylos stronghold was tense. The Angels landed far from the command center, choosing a remote drop zone to avoid detection. Under the cover of darkness, they moved toward their objective, their exosuits masking their presence. Grant led the way, using his scanner to navigate through patrols and automated defenses. As they approached the command center, Rivera split the team into two groups. Bennett and Cole would create a diversion by launching a small-scale attack on a nearby outpost, drawing attention away from the main facility. Meanwhile, Rivera and Grant would infiltrate the command center and plant the data chip. The diversion went off without a hitch. Bennett and Cole hit the outpost hard, their precise strikes forcing the Krylos to scramble reinforcements. Explosions lit up the night sky as alarms blared across the area. Inside the command center, Rivera and Grant moved silently, avoiding patrols and disabling cameras. Grant inserted the data chip into the mainframe, his fingers flying across the keypad. "It's uploading," he whispered. "Just a few more seconds." Suddenly, the lights flickered and red warning signals flashed throughout the facility. They had been detected. "Move," Rivera shouted, grabbing Grant's arm. The two sprinted toward the exit, firing at pursuing soldiers. The narrow corridors echoed with shouts and gunfire as they fought their way out. Just as they reached the surface, Bennett and Cole arrived to cover their retreat. Together, they ran toward their extraction point, the sound of explosions chasing them. When they reached the ship, Rivera turned back for one last look at the command center. Smoke rose from the outpost in the distance, and the faint glow of activity hinted at chaos within the Krylos ranks. They had succeeded, but at a cost. Back on the ship, the team sat in silence, exhausted but alive. Monroe's voice came through the intercom. "Good work, Angels. Intelligence confirms the Krylos are shifting resources. Their forces are stretched thin." Rivera glanced at his team. They were battered and weary, but their resolve remained unshaken. For the first time in weeks, there was a glimmer of hope. The tide was beginning to turn. But the war wasn't over yet. The Angels knew that every victory came with sacrifices, and the road ahead would be long and dangerous. Still, they had proven one thing. No matter how powerful the enemy, Earth would always find a way to fight back. The Angels of Death stood in the shadows of the Krylos flagship, their exosuits cloaked and their weapons ready. Colonel Rachel Monroe's plan had worked. The false intel had forced the Krylos to divert resources, leaving their command structure vulnerable. Now, it was time for the final strike. The team's mission was clear: infiltrate the flagship, confront the Krylos commander, and end the war once and for all. Captain Jason Rivera led the way, his sharp eyes scanning the dimly lit corridors of the massive ship. Sergeant Lauren Bennett followed closely, her weapon trained on every corner. Behind them, Dr. Nathan Cole carried a medical kit, prepared for the worst, while Corporal Ethan Grant monitored their surroundings with a handheld scanner. "This place is a maze," Grant whispered, adjusting the settings on his device. "But the command center should be 3 levels up." Rivera nodded. "Let's move fast. If they catch us, we're done." The journey through the ship was tense. The Angels encountered patrols, but their cloaking technology allowed them to slip past unnoticed. At one point, Bennett disabled a group of soldiers with quick, silent shots, her aim precise and deadly. Each step brought them closer to their goal, but the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on their minds. When they reached the command center, they found it guarded by a squad of elite Krylos warriors. Rivera signaled for the team to hold back while he devised a plan. "Grant, can you disable the doors?" he asked quietly. "I'll try," Grant replied, crouching near a control panel. His fingers moved quickly, bypassing the security systems. With a soft click, the doors slid open, catching the guards off guard. Rivera and Bennett charged in, firing rapidly. The Krylos fought back fiercely, but the Angels' training gave them the edge. Within moments, the guards were down. Inside the command center, the Krylos commander, Vrakstor, stood tall and imposing. His elongated frame loomed over the room, his glowing eyes fixed on the intruders. "You dare enter my ship," he growled, his voice deep and menacing. Monroe stepped forward, her expression calm but firm. She had accompanied the team for this crucial confrontation. "We're here to end this war," she said, addressing Vrakstor directly. "Your rogue factions targeted our medics, an act of cowardice that cannot go unanswered." Vrakstor tilted his head, studying her. "I did not order the attack on your outpost," he replied. "It was the work of traitors within my ranks. They seek to destroy any chance of peace." Monroe's eyes narrowed. "Then help us stop them. Together, we can crush those who betrayed both our species." For a moment, silence filled the room. Vraxtor considered her words, his glowing eyes flickering with thought. Finally, he nodded. Very well, but know this, if you betray me, there will be no mercy. The angels exchanged wary glances but remained focused. Grant accessed the ship's systems, coordinating with Vraxtor's forces to locate the rogue faction's stronghold. The data revealed a hidden base on a distant moon, heavily fortified and brimming with weapons. We hit them hard and fast, Rivera said, his voice steady. No survivors. The joint strike was swift and brutal. Earth's fleet, guided by the angels, launched a surprise attack on the rogue base, while Vraxtor's loyalists provided support from within. Explosions tore through the facility as the two forces worked together, dismantling the traitors' operations. The battle was chaotic, but the combined strength of humans and Krylos proved unstoppable. As the dust settled, the angels regrouped aboard the flagship. Vraxtor approached Monroe, his expression unreadable. Your people fight with honor, he said. Perhaps there is hope for peace after all. Monroe nodded. Let's build on this. For the sake of both our species. Back on Earth, news of the victory spread quickly. The angels of death were hailed as heroes, their actions turning the tide of the war. But for the team, the scars of battle ran deep. They had lost friends, faced unimaginable horrors, and made sacrifices that would never fully heal. As they stood together on the moon base, watching the stars through the window, Rivera spoke softly. We did what we had to do, but the real work starts now. Rebuilding trust, finding peace. Bennett placed a hand on his shoulder. And if anyone tries to break it again, we'll be ready. The angels of death had proven that even in the darkest times, humanity could rise above. Their legacy would live on, not just as warriors, but as symbols of resilience and justice. And though the galaxy still held dangers, they knew they had faced the worst and emerged victorious. The war was over, but the scars it left behind were deep. The angels of death stood on a quiet hill overlooking the human colony, its streets bustling with life once again. Captain Jason Rivera watched silently as children played in the distance, their laughter carrying in the crisp air. It was a sound he hadn't heard in months, a reminder of why they had fought so hard. Dr. Nathan Cole knelt beside a small memorial stone, his fingers brushing the engraved names of those who had fallen. Emily Dawson's name was among them, her sacrifice etched into history. We couldn't save everyone, Cole said softly, his voice heavy with emotion. But we made sure their deaths weren't in vain. Sergeant Lauren Bennett stood nearby, her arms crossed as she stared at the horizon. It's strange, she admitted. We spent so long fighting, and now, there's nothing left to fight for. Rivera glanced at her. There's always something to fight for. Peace doesn't come easy. It has to be protected. Corporal Ethan Grant adjusted his glasses, his usual calm demeanor tinged with sadness. Do you think people will remember what we did, or will they just move on? They'll remember, Rivera replied firmly. Not because of us, but because of what happened here. The medics, the soldiers, the civilians, we all paid a price. That's something no one should forget. Colonel Rachel Monroe joined them later that evening, her presence commanding yet gentle. She carried a small box filled with medals, each one representing an act of courage during the war. These are for you, she said, handing them out to the team. But I know none of you need them to feel proud of what you've done. Bennett held her medal in her hand, turning it over thoughtfully. Doesn't feel like enough, does it? It never does, Monroe agreed. But it's not about the medals. It's about knowing you made a difference. As night fell, the angels gathered around a fire, sharing stories and memories of those they had lost. They laughed at old jokes and smiled at moments of triumph, even as tears welled up in their eyes. For the first time in a long while, they allowed themselves to feel, to grieve, to heal, and to hope. In the days that followed, the team began to go their separate ways. Rivera returned to Earth, vowing to help rebuild what had been destroyed. Bennett stayed on the moon base, training new recruits and passing on the lessons she had learned. Cole dedicated himself to healing others, working tirelessly in hospitals across the colonies. Grant disappeared into the shadows, using his skills to protect humanity from unseen threats. Though they were apart, the bond they shared remained unbroken. They had faced horrors most could never imagine, and together, they had become something greater than themselves. The Angels of Death were more than soldiers. They were a symbol of resilience, justice, and hope. Far away, on Proxima 7, a new medical outpost stood where the old one had been destroyed. Its walls were stronger, its defenses tighter, but its purpose was the same: to care for all, regardless of race or allegiance. A plaque near the entrance bore the names of the fallen medics, along with a simple message: their sacrifice will never be forgotten. General Aaron Hayes visited the outpost one evening, standing quietly before the plaque. He placed a hand on the cold metal, his expression solemn. "You started this," he murmured, "and because of you, we found a way to end it." Back on Earth, the stars shone brightly in the night sky. Somewhere among them, the Angels of Death had written their legacy. Not with words, but with actions. They had proven that even in the darkest times, humanity could rise above hatred and fear. And though the galaxy still held dangers, Earth knew it had warriors ready to face them. The Angels of Death were gone, but their spirit lived on. In the hearts of those they had saved, in the peace they had forged, and in the promise of a brighter future. They had responded to evil with justice, and in doing so, they had changed the course of history.